Moving on to our next session now, the topic preparing for the third wave of COVID. While the situation has improved and the country is limping back to life, experts predict that India may be hit with another massive third wave. This calls for an all-out readiness from the infrastructure to quickly track disease trends and hotspots to streamlining flow of medical essentials. The country also needs to prepare to mitigate the economic and social impact of any further escalation of COVID. Technology can play an important role in dealing with this crisis. I would like to invite Mr. Prakash Kumar, CEO of Wadhwani Institute of Technology and Policy set up by the Wadhwani Foundation. Prior to this, he was senior advisor with Deloitte India for 5 months, and before that, he was CEO of Goods and Service Tax Network, GSTN, for 6 years. During this period, GST system was designed, developed, and deployed, which provides shared IT infrastructure and services to central and state governments. 12.3 million taxpayers and other stakeholders for GST were impacted through this program. Our next guest, Vipul Singh, CEO, Aarav Unmanned Systems. Aarav Unmanned Systems is a drone solution startup leading commercial segment in India with its vertical integrated end-to-end solutions. Vipul has a background in aerospace engineering and has been very active with policy suggestions and industrial committees for the drone ecosystem in India. Our next guest, Mr. Arun, Karna, MD and CEO, AT&T Global Network Services India Private Limited. More than 30 years of experience in IT telecoms industry, extensive experience in leading the sales of complex, high-value communication networks and solutions. We also have Mr. Amit Sinha, Global Head of Marketing and Communications, Tata Communications. A tenacious and conscientious result-driven leader motivated by curiosity with demonstrated strengths in marketing, strategic alliances, direct and indirect sales. This Power Pack session is moderated by none other than Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Chairman, CyberMedia Group. He needs no introduction, a first-generation entrepreneur along with his family members promoted CyberMedia in 1982. He's a BTech from IIT Delhi and an MBA and IIM from Calcutta. He is the main promoter as well as the chairman and managing director of CyberMedia India Limited. He's an industry veteran with an experience of 40 years and is highly reputed in the IT industry. Over to you, Pradeep sir.
I have a very, very eminent panel today with me. And I think the topic that we are discussing is absolutely prime on everybody's agenda. You know, is there a third wave coming? And what do we need to do to prepare for it? Okay. To start with, let me take a very quick poll amongst my panelists on what do they feel. Is there a wave around the corner? And what are the 3 things that they think that we should do to prepare for it? Let me start with Prakash. Prakash, your views, please.
WHO has already declared the third wave is there, and so have many experts. So we need to prepare well. So that's the first thing. How do we forecast which are the areas which are going to be impacted? And then the third one will be, how do we ensure that whatever we face during wave 2, in terms of logistics, in terms of providing all the amenities and ensuring people don't move around from hospital to hospital because of lack of information, that doesn't.
Okay. Arun, can I have your views on, do you think third wave is around the corner and the 3 things that we need?
Sure, Pradeep ji, and good day all, and extremely delighted and honored to be here. So, not an expert on epidemiology here, but whether there is a third wave or not, we should certainly prepare for it for sure. And even if there is, a mild wave or maybe a not so intense wave, one thing is sure that it will be digital technologies, contactless, touchless technologies, which will probably help us either prevent or soften the blow or even aid recovery as we go along and face the situation as it evolves. So, for example, return to office would definitely be enabled.
Amit, your views, Heisenberg principle, is it a particle, is it a wave?
It is a wave, and unfortunately, history has shown this to us. And it is indeed very possible. And all the indicators, like Prakash mentioned, even from WHO, is already saying that it's happening. The new variants, empowered by our dropping our guard, on masks, sanitizers, and social distancing, can indeed, result in having a third wave that will be far more debilitating than the second. The three things, I think personal safety, that's something all of us have to ensure that we do and practice. From an organization perspective, the organizational readiness and the workforce readiness. So these are the three things.
Wonderful. And Vipul, you have the last word on it.
I have a very limited experience, so I would share my understanding. I think one important aspect to cover is enable the technologies, both digital and advanced technologies, because technology can solve almost all the problems of humanity. Second, awareness. Technology with awareness solves almost everything. So awareness needs to be increased much in advance. I think people generally have short memories, so they tend to forget what happened in the first and the second wave. So much before the third wave is predicted to come, a good awareness program will solve the problem. Third most important thing, to make sure that the economy keeps functioning. There is a lot of requirement to integrate autonomous as well as automated solutions for management of workforces as well as factories, which will keep the economy running, which is most important for recovery from the pandemic.
I think, we all seem to be feeling that we should be at least prepared for a third wave, whether it comes or not. But it is something that we should be ready for. And what I heard was that, yes, there need to be things about personal safety, tracing, awareness, and so on, which means that, in terms of monitoring, in terms of prevention, right? The second part very clearly was to do with digital technologies, that digital will play a very, very important role. And we'll talk more about it as we go along. And enterprises, economy, all of that engine needs to keep on running. And the fourth, that, logistics to manage if it comes is going to be something which is very, very important. So glad that, the panelists have sort of given a very, very great spectrum on what all we need to do in terms of preparing for this third. Let me start with you, Prakash. Your views on the entire area of the health surveillance grade and what needs to be done, because you worked in the government, you worked in the private sector, now you're working on policy. So I think you will be able to give a very good perspective on this.
I will start with something which is we have done quite well, and which is how do we manage cyclones and tsunamis. I have a small presentation kind of thing, one slide deck, and I request the organizers to kindly put it there, which shows what we do there. And I had opportunity to work in that ministry where we handle slide number 2. One is how do we predict, and then how much time we have to take an action. Now, in case of tsunami and cyclone, it varies from hours and days, and same is the case with COVID. But then what do we do? How do we use technology there? In case of these natural disasters, where we generally do inundation map, which all areas will be identified, impacted, what will be the severity. And exactly in this case as well, COVID, what kind of areas will get impacted. Here, the difference is these natural disasters come and there is a huge peak and then it subsides. Where in case of COVID, it is much longer. It goes up, there is a peak, but then gradually comes. And there, the data which we get basically gives us idea on infection rate, trends, hotspot, and that is what precisely is now being used by the health authorities across the country to identify which are the hotspots where you have micro lockdown and all that. The next question comes, and that's very important part, is how do we evacuate, or what action do we take? What we saw in some of the large cities, people were moving from hospital to hospital. On the other hand, a large city like Mumbai made a very beautiful arrangement where whichever place you are, first the protocol, you are informed, please go to this health center, and where there is a doctor who will examine and tell you whether you can stay at home or you need to go to a hospital, and then they decide which hospital. Now that was a simple innovation which helped them to manage it so well, which didn't happen in many places. Now again, technology can play a big role. The next one comes infrastructure creation, which we have learned hard way during wave 2. How do we ensure that it's readily available, whether it's oxygenated bed or normal bed, ICU bed, and all that. In fact, some of the volunteer agencies, they came up and in a short period of time, they created this. But then why can't we just adopt that and make it available now, not only during this pandemic period, but otherwise centrally available information on availability of beds, different kinds of beds and all that, and also oxygen supply, medicine supply, especially those medicines which could only be purchased by the hospital. And what doctors, how many paramedics are available, because this was also a problem which I was told during the peak period. They didn't know exactly how many are available in which shift, in which hospital. Now that's something where technology can play a role, and it has done. And the last one again, Amit, is ensuring how we manage and give right information to the people in right time. So these are different aspects which we can learn from how we have very successfully handled in our country the natural disasters, using that and tweaking it. And in fact, part of it has been done, and I hopefully quickly they do it, especially for the infra. It's availability of information and passing the information to the people who are impacted, what to do, where to go. So that will be my take on this. It's not a grid, but this is basically use of ICT for handling this kind of pandemic. Over to you, Pradeep.
So thanks, but I have just one query on this. Who you think should be driving this? You know, when you come to tsunami, cyclones, you gave a very good example. So there is the National Disaster Management, which has laid out the blueprint, and it is the states that execute it. Who do you think should actually, drive this entire?
The action on the ground happens only through the states. There is no doubt about it. There also the Ministry of Earth Sciences and IMD, they give, or the other tsunami warning center. But then action is with the states. Oh, the central again, NDRF is there, but they have representative of the state. It is the state unit which controls. They have the intimate knowledge, and it has to be done through that. Only thing, how do we bring all other partners, like in this particular case, the volunteers, the private sector, so that we all join hands together, and the roles are very, very clearly specified, and then it is done. Not that last minute we are going helter-skelter.
So I'll come back to you on some other questions on this model that you made, which I think lays out a very good approach towards being prepared for the third wave. Let me come to you, Arun. You talked about business, and today there is a need in terms of balancing, for companies to balance growth as well as employee well-being, right? Your views on that? How exactly should businesses be combining those two?
That's a great question, Pradeep ji, and I'll take a leaf from what Prakash has already said. We have seen that over the last 12 to 15 months, ever since the pandemic hit, there has been a marked increase or acceleration in the adoption of digital technologies. And what emerged was that those enterprises who had not yet embarked on their digital journey, or were rather early in their digital journey, they were badly impacted. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, those enterprises who are fairly down the road in terms of digital adoption, uh, they stood to not only survive but even thrive. So, examples are all for us to see, the online marketplaces, the e-commerce companies, online media and entertainment, IT services companies, anything which had to do with doorstep delivery, educheck, fintech, health tech, these were the sectors who really scrambled to sort of adopt and accelerate the adoption of digital technologies, and they stood to gain. So fair to say, with the increased dependence on these digital technologies, there's a blurring between the physical world and the digital world. So now we have this new term called phygital coming into place. Really, so that is one of those jargons that have come about. But obviously, this was all driven, and we believe it will continue to be driven by the business growth imperatives, and those imperatives haven't changed. So but maybe they've got accelerated. So there is the agility required to scale operations up or down in response to market demand changes. We need more flexibility now to customize products to consumer needs. I'll quickly touch upon the sort of major technology trends which have aided this, and quickly switch on to the humane and human aspect of the same as well. So these trends existed even before the pandemic hit. What the pandemic has done is to accelerate these trends. So the adoption of cloud, for example, we have seen a significant move to the cloud over the last 12 months or so. Critical enterprise applications have been moved to the cloud, and the cloud adoption rate continues to increase. Proliferation in mobility. So the need to access enterprise applications from anywhere, from any device, in the work from anywhere, work from home scenario, that has been aided by mobility. Third is this whole move to software. So it's been a cliche since long that software is eating the world, but it has never been truer than in these times. Even traditional businesses like telecom, which have long been hardware centric, we have also shifted to software defined networking, network function virtualization, software defined data centers. The orchestration and control of network functions is all software driven. The increase in IoT adoption, not only to improve efficiencies and productivity, but actually to maintain continuity of business, that has been seen coming along. Uh, it's becoming a data powered economy very quickly. We all know that if people said that data is the new oil, but the oil has to be refined as well. So now the increased use of analytics, AI, and ML to draw insights from that data, actionable insights, and then to sort of take strategic decisions based on that, that is coming to the fore. And of course, last but not the least is this whole boom in virtual collaboration, which we are seeing here. We are on this platform today collaborating across geographies. But that has become a must to
Arun,
continue business. But all this has, technology can only take you that far. There has to be a balance between technology and constant employee engagement to ensure their overall wellness, both physical and mental, because that would lead to engagement in turn. And I think that calls for a leadership pivot in these times. It calls for a more empathetic style of leadership. It warrants leaders to think and act differently.
Amit, Arun has raised a very important thing. Of course, he's talked about cloud mobility, software, IoT, data, AI, ML. But he has also talked about the human part. And, the first wave and the second wave have taken their toll as far as humans are concerned, which is so important for driving enterprises. Uh, Initially everybody was going gung-ho about work from home. And now there are people who've been saying that, no, we need to come to the office so that we can. So, people have been talking about hybrid models and so on. How do you balance growth and, the work-life balance? Your views on that?
In wave one, we were all locked away suddenly, and the work-life balance went, pretty topsy-turvy. But I think looking back, wave two was far more intense and more difficult. Not just because we were locked away, but because this time the COVID actually impacted almost everybody's family. I would say everybody. We all knew somebody near and dear who was impacted. And, you could earlier, you're stuck at home. Yes, we had, some domestic work to do and also do the work at the same time. But this time it was running around, getting oxygen cylinders and hospitals and things like that, right? So, from that perspective, the wave two really, really impacted work-life balance, I believe, for everyone, right? Moving forward, I think what we need to look at from an organization perspective. So moving forward, I think what is going to be important is for us to relook at some of the best practices that we've had in the past, right? What has happened now is the home and office has merged into one, it's blended into one, right? And while that may work in the short run, in the long run, that is not something which is going to be scalable. So we do need to be able to separate out the work from the home, right? And then be able to do this in a more, structured way, if I may say, right? So moving forward, the hybrid model work from home is not going away, but I think the way we will be working from home has to be more evolved, or work from anywhere has to be more evolved, and the work-life balance has to be there by clearly demarcating, the different areas, because it's all got mashed up into one right now, and that is not something which is healthy or scalable.
So, the entire work from home culture needs to be provided some sort of a structure. Great point. Vipul, from a technology, all panelists are in agreement that the big driver of this change is going to be technology. Which are some of the technologies which are absolutely essential for us in terms of preparing for the third wave?
There are multiple technologies which have been tested in the past. I think one of the things which we have learned from the previous experience of two waves is that we need technologies which are improving our rapid response, which are flexible in nature, which also basically enable scaled operation, and last and most important, with minimum human intervention. Because any technology which have these four characteristics will be able to solve this problem and help us tackle with the situation much better than what we have been doing in the past. I think one of the such technologies which I would like to bring on the table today, based on my limited experience, is the drone technology, where a lot of parts of the world have earlier also used drones for emergency response. And I think India can also leverage this technology quite well for reaching out to the remote locations where generally land-based logistic systems are not that, let's say, efficient, and also dependent on a lot of weather and human factor. So if you look at the four characteristics which I talked about, all those four characteristics can be found in the drone technology. Similarly, there is a lot of communication technology which is to be used to create regular awareness among the people, which government is already doing. But I think now the time is that we start creating that awareness much in advance before the third wave really hits us through every medium possible, right? And the most important, the third most important technology which I feel can play a very vital role here is the artificial intelligence, because it will just compensate for the lack of human presence, which we are currently facing a challenge with, because we cannot be physically present for all the jobs. So that is another technology which we said which should emphasize upon. Let it be healthcare, facilitating healthcare, I would say consultancy or education system, whichever has been, especially the education system, primary education system has been badly affected by the current COVID wave. A couple of years have been lost by these kids in the primary government schools. Most of the private schools are able to cope up, but not the government schools in the rural areas. So if you look at the two technologies that I talked about, the communication technology and artificial intelligence, they can actually combine together, play a very vital role in bridging these gaps and to make sure that we either get less affected by the third wave or recover faster after it has arrived.
Vipul, for painting that entire picture, and I agree with you that healthcare, education, also drone technologies, these are some of the things which are, which, I mean, healthcare education has been impacted, and we need to find solutions for that. And going ahead, that is going to be something which is going to be very important. Let me come back to you, Arun. You started talking about leadership, right? What kind of leadership is today required in terms of ensuring that we are ready for, because the second wave leadership failed, right? In organizations, state level, central level, all levels, I think there was a failure in the second wave. What do you think are going to be some of those characteristics that are required in the third wave?
A very relevant question for these times, Pradeep ji, and I touched upon a few. I think in these times of uncertainty and a lot of stress on individuals, I think it calls for a more empathetic style of leadership. Also, because a lot of the traditional data-driven models of decision making may no longer readily apply because the data itself has got skewed. This calls for more intuitive, bold, risk-taking style of leadership as well. So the leader himself or herself has to be resilient, has to be sort of emotionally stable and grounded. And the more important thing is you not only have to lead, you have to be seen to be leading. So there has to be this coming out of the leader out in the open, and you have to be seen to be leading in these times, because all the informal structures previously where you could go and meet people face to face, shake hands, meet them in cafeteria or over water cooler conversations, or even in big events, that's no longer available. Those avenues for the leader to show up are no longer available. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is, because there is an increased dependence on digital technologies, there has to be a concerted effort to also align the culture of the organization to a more digital culture. Otherwise, the whole thing is bound to fail, because the success or failure of digital adoption in any organization depends on how well it is adopted by the last link in the chain. So it could be, for example, the end user who could actually be the worker on the manufacturing line in a factory. But then the culture flows from top. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is on the reverse side, the workforce is saying, this cannot all be about, productivity increase and efficiencies and business growth. Whatever is the culture has to take into account our feelings, our concerns, our emotions, and our aspirations also. So, in fact, this is actually giving rise to a new paradigm where you not only have effective digital transformation, but you also need to have effective, with an A, effective digital transformation, which takes into account the individual or workforce's purpose, engagement, fairness at the workplace. So all those softer aspects come really to the fore.
Sure.
So that's an interesting aspect and evolution of leadership that is needed, sir.
You said risk-taking, resilient, and culture right up till the bottom level. And therefore, Prakash, when you start talking about this health surveillance grid model that you shared with us, you know, how do we ensure that crisis management we are well prepared for it? What are some of the changes which are required to ensure that that is done? The reason why I'm saying that is that between wave one and wave two, there was a lot of talk about, that there should be oxygen plants and so on. They were sanctioned and stuff like that. But when the wave two hit us, it was actually not there, and we were, we were hit very badly because of knowing what the problems were, but not being able to create solutions for that. So your views on this?
So there are two parts of it. One is how the surveillance is done. In fact, the traditional method was when the patient goes to a primary health center or CHC, etc., the health worker writes suspected this. So that gets compiled and it doctor diagnoses, then a status changes. And finally, when the lab confirmation comes, so these are the three different stages. And these are traditionally compiled at the district level and then state, and then it comes to center. Old days, it used to be fax. It used to be weekly. Now they're compiling it in majority of the cases, it comes online based on wherever the automation has taken place. What they did a very smart thing during COVID, directly taking it from the lab. So how many samples have gone, what got confirmed, and that data along with the PIN code or the address, locality, and the mobile phone number is mandatorily given by the lab to the ICMR. And ICMR then uses it for, and then it gives to other people. So now you run on top of that machine learning algorithms to tell you what is the trend, which are the hotspots, the moment it crosses the threshold. So that's a beautiful thing which has been done. On top of that, what they have also done for contact tracing, which cell you are connected to, how many people, where you interacted, and that information also gets, so that's the way they do how many one infected persons, how many others have got infected. So this trend and concentration, so that you can define whether to lock that area or not, that has already been put in place. That's a beautiful thing which has been done. Now, the second part of your question was that how do you ensure that simple project management? When the first time it was decided, someone should have kept monitoring it, it should have been available. And that is where the transparency comes. Like, why can't all this be put in public domain? That, okay, this is what's being done, this is what is the status. And that brings lots of, if it's not being done correctly, someone else will point out that you are not doing this or not. So there was, and the other aspect was, no one actually predicted that it will be like that. Let's be fair to that. No one had predicted that it will be so bad for us. And of course, then other aspects, that a lack of availability of information, right information at the right time, made people to run from place to place. And then some of our own doing, like oxygen cylinder leke ghar mein rakh, whether you need it or not. So hoarding also played. I mean, there were not only oxygen cylinder, medicine, and many other things. People just started hoarding it, which are ultimately created. So that's another aspect. But then again, if you use technology, use good project management things, then what you asked will be managed well, and then suddenly will not be found lacking on action. So it's basically use of these tools properly.
Vipul, one very important thing in terms of preparing for the third wave is this entire vaccination program. You run a drone company. So what role do you think UAVs can play in terms of ensuring, delivery of vaccines to different parts of the country?
If we look at our country, we have a wide variety of geography and topology. And some of the areas, especially the northeast areas and the Western Ghats, are a very difficult terrain where each village might be just 20 to 30 kilometers or 10 kilometers from each other when you count a linear distance. But when it comes to traveling from one location to the other location, it takes a couple of hours because you have to compensate the hills. And that's where all the logistic problems start. And as you can see, the rainy season is already on the verge and it's raining heavily everywhere. On the other side, we'll have the Himalayas and the Northeast getting affected with the winter. So the mobilization of emergency supplies, including the vaccines, during this period will become a difficulty because it is largely dependent on humans as well as the land-based logistics. So drones are a technology which again fit into those four characteristics which we talked about, wherein it can just take off from one remote location or from the rooftop of a small healthcare facility, which might be stocking the medicine within, let's say, 20, 30 villages. And for a drone, 20 kilometers takes about 20 minutes of time to reach. So not more than that, about 20 to 30 minutes to reach. So because it is moving in a three-dimensional aerial space. So there are no obstructions, there are no effects of landslides, and very limited effect of weather. So distribution becomes very, very easy. On the other side, not only this, the drone technology has got a lot of...
Is it already being used, the technology for vaccine distribution?
At this moment, ICMR is already running a pilot project to validate the technology's potential as well as to define the standards and the protocols to use the technology, because it's a very new nascent technology at the moment. So people at different levels in the hierarchy system needs to understand the potential and also how to integrate with their processes. So those level of understanding is being developed. It's a very welcoming approach wherein government is already looking forward to such kind of leveraging such kind of technology. So IIT Kanpur, ICMR, and certain other similar institutes are running these tests. And the idea is to be able to establish the protocols and the standards which should be followed to utilize this technology. Now, coming to the other side of the effect of this technology, what I have noticed in the last 1.5 years is that even the industrial production has been basically enabled by these drones, where drones were leveraged for the inspection and monitoring of various industrial assets and management of their day-to-day operations and productivity, because earlier these activities were conducted by people. And now the people have been replaced by drones, because you can stand at one location and do a 100-kilometer pipeline inspection instead of traveling through the entire course. So those kind of aspects of drone technology is also being utilized during the first and the second wave effect.
Had been said earlier, we need contactless solutions and so on, and UAVs will play a very, very important role there.
Absolutely.
Amit, all of us have large number of people working for us, right? What can we do in terms of, educating our own employees? What can we do in terms of using them as an ambassador to ensure that, the preparedness for the third wave is there? What role can enterprise play in terms of propagating this?
See, the hybrid world is here to stay, right? And I don't see it going back to what it was, pre-pandemic. So clearly, from a hybrid world and how this is going to pan out, workforce flexibility is one aspect where organizations will have to enable the workforce to really work from anywhere, be it office, home, or any other, location. And that has to be done by empowering them with adaptable office infrastructure. I did hear about moving to cloud. Yes, that's a fact, but it's not just moving to cloud. It's also about the secure access, remote access, efficiently and safely. Over the time of the pandemic, there have been many ransomware and phishing attacks and various other attacks, and some very large, well-known companies have been impacted as well. So that's one aspect, the flexibility. The second thing is, the part of return to work, the safety on the return to work office, and that has to be, powered by adaptable office infrastructure. Even today, our offices are really, we have the same air conditioning system, which is running on across the entire floor. So if you can imagine, what will happen if you have a couple of people, or even one person coming in who's positive with one of the newer variants, it could wreak havoc. So again, I don't know what the solution to that is, whether it's air filters or whatever it is, but one needs to look at that. Workforce safety, to make sure that there is no clustering of people unnecessarily. So we have solutions based on IoT that actually enable that. And then supporting and enabling the work from home again, starting right from wave one. We created secure remote access, collaboration platforms were plenty. Employee safety, I did talk about customer experience solutions, basically by providing what we call a secure, connected digital experience with a rich, set of solutions and services. And the good news is that it's all available today. So various, areas, the workforce itself, the work model, the infrastructure at office, the workforce behavior, I think the platforms and tools. So it's a multidimensional, area that we need to look at to make sure that we come out of this in the best.
We need this multidimensional approach and, technology to be able to address the hybrid world. Gentlemen, we are coming to the end of our time, and therefore, may I request you for some closing remarks, and I have some specific questions that I would like to ask each of you. But can we just keep it to 2 minutes, please? Arun, Amit talked about the cyber threat security and so on. How do customers manage their infrastructure? How do they protect themselves? Because there's been an absolute increase in this area, APTs and so on. So it's a very serious concern today.
So absolutely relevant and extremely critical point in these times. The couple of things that we as service providers and the enterprises need to do is first follow the principle of defense in depth, which is to say there has to be multi-layered approach to security. So you secure your endpoints, you secure your network, you secure your data, apps, and IT infrastructure all in their own bubbles. But what you do additionally is you put a protective, all encompassing layer over it, which is basically a software defined threat detection and response mechanism, which feeds off a threat intelligence mechanism. And this would involve, of course, a lot of AI, ML, and analytics driven automation, but that's happening. Also, the whole security paradigm is changing from just detecting and preventing, it is pivoting to also recover, respond, and even retaliate. So you need to go after the bad guys and recover what you have lost. So that's the new paradigm that's coming through. And of course, now, we have seen with the emergence of network and security, those are a single dialogue, that's a single discussion. Network and security are converged now. So you see now the emergence of SASE based frameworks, for example, which are multi-pillared security paradigms. So I think that's the call of the hour.
Right, and I like the word retaliate.
Yeah.
Vipul, just coming to the UAVs. Now, in any kind of an emergency, you did talk about that. They can handle the logistics and so on. They can also be your eye in the sky, right? Your views on that? Some closing remarks.
They can be, and they have been. With a group of all the UAV enthusiasts in the country, when the first wave hit us, and there was a huge shortage of monitoring of crowd, as well as maintaining the social distancing during the first wave, because no one was aware how to really tackle those situations. Close to 1,500 UAVs were deployed in different cities including Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, and many other tier 2 and tier 3 cities where police was involved. And this was all done on voluntary basis, where people owning these drones and industry startups and industries who had these drones helped out the police. They flew the drone round the clock, and from one small locations in a, let's say, area where the patrol car used to stay at one particular location with just 2 jawans, they were able to monitor a radius of about 5 kilometers, which is a huge area, and they were able to patrol. And only the patrol car used to go to the position where crowd was present. So that's how UAVs were already leveraged, and even the government of India enabled these uses by giving very fast exemptions and permissions so that the technology can give its best benefit. So I think now the time is to scale it up. We have learned how it works, how it helps. Now we need to put a systematic scale approach so that it can be leveraged if we have to in any further waves to come.
And Amit, how do we manage change during these uncertain times? What sort of contingency plans should organizations be drawing up?
But one way to conquering change, and that is being agile, right? There is no other way but to be agile and proactively adapting, demonstrating this across business plans, products, services, go-to-market, new customer segments, and more. Everything is on the table at these times. In wave one, for example, we saw how the leading paint companies adapted to manufacturing sanitizers, right? And wave two, large manufacturing companies came to the rescue of hospitals and patients by converting industrial oxygen for patient care, right? Other than this, the pandemic may force a change in the very fabric of the business itself. Obvious ones are popular restaurants shifting from dine-in to takeaway, home delivery, large sports events going virtual, right? Stores moving from malls to store at home. Some airlines converting passenger flights into essential goods and handling medical cargo and so on and so forth. So many organizations have successfully managed this change and navigated it through by being agile, by looking at new models, and that is the way we need to tackle this moving forward.
That we need to be agile in these times. And Prakash, uh, you know, you did talk about technology. The big word used these days is AI, ML, and so on. How can we use artificial intelligence to sort of prepare ourselves for the third wave?
Largely, let me just talk about how to forecast or how accurately it's being done. And there are large number of universities as well as other organized companies which are working on it and using the data which is published by the government health authorities. So that's how do you look at data and then identify trends and also help them to identify how it's going to come, what its behavior, when it's going to be. And many of them have predicted with great accuracy. Of course, it all depends what machine learning algorithm you're using, what assumptions you have. Assumptions are also very important, and especially in our world, which is very, very dynamic, how people move, how they perceive things. Another very interesting thing which I saw, one company started, and not now, in fact, they had started a little earlier, where they process news articles published in more than 40 languages across the world. They look at the chatter, it's basically NLP based, and then derives intelligence out of that. And they were one of the first to talk about Wuhan thing based on what they had seen in the Chinese newspapers and had alerted some of their customers. Of course, this is a paid service which they provide. So there are multiple ways where these emerging technologies like machine learning or even NLP is being used for predicting. Of course, the models are different, assumptions are different, and hence you have accuracy is also different. But many of them have been able to do it very, very accurately. So this is one of the most important part. And the other one which I mentioned earlier is how do we manage all our resources? That's really critical, not only for pandemic, otherwise as well. Why should we not have all this information readily available in public domain on an app so that I can just go and see? It was made available by many volunteers, but then it's as good as what the data is being fed. If it is fed in the hospital manually, updated every 3 hours or 4 hours, then you had it. Then your data is as old as that. Or the one who is feeding the data, if he keeps 2 beds for some other consideration, then you are gone. That 2 beds are not visible. So that's why it's important to connect it with the transaction, the way it's happening. A bed gets vacant. The moment you discharge it, it's available. So it is based on transaction. What Vipul was mentioning, it should come from the transaction rather than manually. So these are some of the important things which we need, and technology is a plenty. We are one of the leaders as our whole software and services industry. We should make use of that to be ahead, especially in times to come.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. If I was to sort of summarize the takeaways from our discussion today, we need to be working on predictive areas in terms of identification, monitoring, in terms of creating the right infrastructure which is required. All this requires a plan. There will be a lot of technology that will be required to drive this entire thing. The wheels of economy have to run on the strength of strong leadership, which takes along the people and takes along, converts this entire plan into action. So thank you very much, gentlemen. This has indeed been a very, very fruitful and helpful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, for such a wonderful discussion on how technology can actually be a game changer in preparing the country in every aspect.